Kristin came home not for vacation, not to visit her parents, but out of necessity. She had received news that her mother had been hospitalized. Although Kristin hoped that everything would turn out fine and her mother would recover, her heart told her otherwise. Helen had been complaining about feeling unwell for a while, but hadn't sought medical help because she was always busy. She had worked tirelessly, believing that she would take care of her health once she had raised her only daughter and retired. Unfortunately, it seemed that her health had deteriorated sooner than expected. Now Kristin was sitting by her mother's sickbed, shocked by how much she had changed. The poor woman had become noticeably slimmer and paler in a short period of time. "Don't worry, Kristin. The doctors here are good. They'll cure me." "Why did you come home? You shouldn't be worried about me," her mother reassured her. But of course Kristin was worried. Her mother was all she had. They had lived together their entire lives. Kristin never knew her father, and her mother had never been married. She had given birth to Kristin from a man she loved and who had disappeared. He probably didn't even know that his girlfriend was pregnant. Thus the two of them relied on each other. Well, mostly Helen relied on her daughter, dreaming of a happier future for Kristin. So the two of them lived for each other, or in other words, Helen lived mostly for her daughter, dreaming of a happier future for her. But now Kristin's only dream was for her mother to recover. However, after speaking with the doctor, she knew that her mother's recovery was highly uncertain. "Unfortunately, your mum has neglected her illness for too long. She needs urgent surgery now, but it will cost a significant amount of money. Yes, you can wait for a government subsidy, but it may take too much time," the doctor explained. "If we pay it for ourselves, how much would it cost?" Kristin asked, feeling a chilling horror. The amount mentioned by the doctor confirmed her worst fears. They had never had that kind of money before. In fact, Kristin couldn't even imagine having half that amount, and she had no idea where to get it. But what other choice did they have? Just sit there and wait? No, that was impossible. So, while holding her mother's weak fingers, Kristin desperately searched for a way out, but realized that there simply wasn't one. Maybe sell our house, but no one would buy it, especially not for that much money. And where would Mum live if we did? There are no other options. Transfer to a distance learning program and get a job? Well, maybe in 5 years I'd have enough money, she thought hopelessly. "Go to the city, darling," Helen spoke, trying to sound strong. "You need to finish your studies. Don't give up because of me. Do you want me to feel guilty for not being able to do anything for you? What's the point of you being here by my side? I'll recover faster if I know you're doing well." Kristin understood her mother was right. She should go to the city to study, and mainly to find a way to earn money. There must be some way. Maybe she could take out a loan or ask someone there. But here in their village, no one could help. Even in the city, who could she rely on? She was a student living in a dormitory, surrounded mostly by other students. She couldn't borrow money from them, not even if some of them had wealthy parents. They wouldn't lend money to a poor student who couldn't even promise when or how she would be able to repay it. Kristin pondered this question day and night, but found no answer. Everyone she turned to sympathized with her, but couldn't offer any help. While Kristin was agonizing over her predicament, a rumor started circulating around her college. Another student, her classmate, was in trouble. However, trouble was not sympathetic to Cynthia or anyone else. Cynthia was a beautiful girl from a wealthy family. She was known for her arrogance and boasting about her father's wealth. She didn't perform well in her studies and relied on money to pass her exams, even the easiest ones. "I don't understand why she even bothers going to the college. She could have just bought her diploma, and it would have been cheaper," some people commented. "Why does she do it? Who does she want to impress? People from her own circle?" others wondered. "Well, she's not that dumb. She doesn't want to be just a pretty face. She wants to achieve something," a few defended her. Kristin wasn't paying attention to Cynthia, but there was one thing that caught her eye. She and Cynthia were very similar. They both were tall and slender frames, had long blonde hair and big eyes. From a distance, or from behind, they could easily be mistaken for one another, if you didn't pay attention to their clothing, of course. Kristin dressed very modestly and would walk to the dormitory after classes, while Cynthia would get into a brand new car and drive to her parents' luxury mansion. But now, things have taken a turn. Cynthia had hit a man with her car, and he was now in intensive care. Cynthia was facing potential jail time. How could she? The students judged. Her daddy will just bail her out. They'll pay off the victim, and the case will be over. You'll see, she'll be walking around here like nothing happened. You never know, the man might be permanently injured, and this girl didn't even have the sense to confess or apologize. Now she's denying it. It wasn't me, it wasn't my car, I was on the sidewalk, I don't know anything. But the incident happened in the centre, where there are cameras all around, capturing it from every angle. It's a high-profile case. She can't get away with it. The man whom she hit was just an ordinary person. Who will stand up for him? Cynthia's daddy will throw him some money, and that will be the end of it. He'll have to stay quiet. But Kristin didn't care about these gossips. She accidentally overheard the conversations and dreamed of getting hit by a wealthy man's car and demanding compensation for the physical and emotional damage. However, the situation was resolved in a much less tragic way. Cynthia's father approached Kristin with an unusual proposal. I assume you've heard about the trouble my daughter got herself into. Well, I don't really care about the moral aspect. I've had enough of her shenanigans for a long time, and it would be nice to teach her a lesson. But reputation, you know what that means, right? I care about my reputation. That's why I'm coming to you for help, Mr. Cattrall said, without any preamble. How can I help you? Kristin wondered. We can help each other. I've heard about your problems with your mother, so here, I can pay for her surgery if you can take the blame for Cynthia's offence. Kristin only heard one thing. He would pay for the operation. She was willing to do anything for that. So without thinking, she blurted out, I agree. But then she immediately became confused. But how? I don't even have a driver's license. That's not a problem. You asked my daughter to lend you her car for a short ride, and being inexperienced, you had a hit-and-run incident. That's all there is to it. But they said there were cameras everywhere. Won't they recognise the truth? What did they see? I've gone through all the footage. All they show is a young girl with long hair. You have the same figure and a similar face, if you don't look too closely. And trust me, no one will be scrutinising it. You'll go to the police station in Cynthia's clothes and claim that you were the one driving. A confession is the strongest evidence, haven't you heard? But I'll go to jail. Kristin was afraid. Look, if I'm going to do something like this, I won't spare any money. We'll bribe everyone. The victim, the lawyer. I'll find the best one. You'll get a 2-year probation. That's it. You'll have a criminal record, but it'll be a minor offence. And in a couple of years, it'll be expunged. But your mother will be healthy. Isn't that worth it? That's not an argument. All right, I'm ready for anything, Kristin said firmly, looking into the cold eyes of her interlocutor. I can trust you, right? Of course, I am a businessman, and my word has a high price, Mr. Cattrall replied. They discussed all the details, and the next day, Kristin went to the investigator in charge of the case to confess. She claimed that she had asked her friend Cynthia for permission to drive her car. She was confident that nothing terrible would happen. She had planned to drive within the speed limit and follow all traffic rules. However, she got carried away and the accident occurred. And why did you flee the scene of the accident without even attempting to help the victim? The investigator asked. I was scared. I had no license. It was my friend's car and I doubted the man was hurt too badly. He just fell down, that's all. Why didn't you come right away? because I was scared, I was ashamed. I thought I had let Cynthia down and her parents would fight. The main accused was Kristin. It was unclear from the cameras who was driving. The case did not require a long trial, but everything went not the way Cynthia's father had described. Kristin had a lawyer, but not the best one. She had a free lawyer appointed by the state who had no desire to look for extenuating circumstances. However, Kristin herself did not try to justify herself. She admitted her guilt, cried sincerely, and was ready to ask for forgiveness from the victim. She hadn't seen Cynthia's father since that conversation, so she couldn't ask how her mother was doing. As for Cynthia, Kristin saw her only during cross-examination when she confirmed her words. Yes, I let my friend Kristin drive my car, but I had no idea she would be so careless. How could you, Kristin? You promised that everything would be fine, and what did you do? Because of you, my dad is angry with me, threatening to take away my car. And that poor man is in the hospital now, she cried, and Kristin had to apologise. She thought that there had been some mistake with the lawyer, but Mr. Cattrall won't refuse to pay for the operation. He had promised. He was perfectly capable of doing it all. But to her great misfortune, there was no operation. Mr. Cattrall didn't even check with the hospital about Kristin's mother's condition. He just forgot about his promises right after the verdict was announced. However, Helen somehow found out about her daughter being put on trial, and this significantly worsened her serious condition, and the woman died, unable to cope with this grief. Upon learning about the death of her only family member, Kristin felt completely indifference towards everything, and the court sentence, 4 years in prison, was listened to with complete indifference. She was left alone in this world, and did it matter where she was about to spend her days? In the prison, on the outside, or somewhere else? She felt like she was in hell, blaming only herself. How could she trust the word of a man she didn't know? How could she have allowed her mother to die alone, and with the thought that her daughter's life had come to such a conclusion, and now nothing could be changed? Her mum was buried by strangers, and Kristin had to live alone in a foreign and hostile world. She wasn't afraid of the prison. She thought it couldn't get any worse than it already was, and at first it really wasn't. When she first met her cellmates, they just looked at the new girl, trying to figure out who she really was. Kristin sat down on the assigned bunk and sat there without moving, in a complete stupor. "Well, they've sent us a psycho," one of them exclaimed. "That's for sure. She should be in a mental hospital. They just sit there, and at night they get up and attack everyone," another agreed. But the more experienced women decided to stand up for Kristin. "Come on, it's her first time. She can't get her bearings. Look, she's fresh and clean. She's just afraid of us. Hey, what are you doing? Wake up. You're not in solitary confinement. You should talk to the group. Do you hear that? Or are you really sick? What's your name?" Kristin had to answer, even though she couldn't say it. She didn't want to talk to anyone, to get acquainted. She didn't want to look at anyone at all. The cellmates left her alone at first. Apparently they decided it was necessary to let a person get used to it, and then teach them the laws of life in such a place. She still kept to herself, not because she was afraid or, as some people suggested, despised her cellmates. She simply had no strength for any acquaintances and revelations. She didn't trust anyone anymore. Why talk to people if it only leads to such terrible outcomes? She agreed to do what was required, to observe the rules, to work in the sewing workshop, and not to cause trouble for anyone. But it wasn't enough. It turned out that the inmates had their own laws. At first, the prisoners saw Kristin as a potential cellmate who could bring in valuable packages, money, or other important items. However, they soon realized that she was lonely and poor, receiving no letters, parcels, or even going on dates. While some people were angry and scornful towards Kristin, others were sympathetic. Not everyone in the prison had a hardened heart. Some supported her and stood up for her when she needed it. "Kristin, don't be so bitter. What's your sentence, 4 years? Before you know it, you'll be on the outside. And if no one is waiting for you, it's for the best. It would be a shame if someone dumped you. But when you come out, it will be like starting a new life. You're young, beautiful, with a great figure and face. Why would you be discouraged?" said a middle-aged convict. "Oh, come on. She isn't such an angel as she is pretending to be," another person angrily responded, who seemed to be around the same age as Kristin, but her face showed signs of a more turbulent life. She was a student, drove an expensive car, and even hit a man. "Pity her, but she'll get out of here. Her rich friends will give her a new Mercedes and she'll hit you." Kristin did not disclose the reasons for her imprisonment to anyone, so many people assumed she was from rich and arrogant kids. Some believed that her relatives had abandoned her because she had done something terrible to them, but over time, most people stopped bothering her. Kristin didn't share her plans with anyone, but she decided to become a model. She wanted to do it for her mother, who had always dreamed of her becoming a model. Finally, Kristin's time in prison was coming to an end. She stepped outside for the first time in 4 years, feeling like a normal free person, but with a sad smile. No one was waiting for her. No one came to greet her. It was understandable. She had to start her life on her own, without hope for anyone. At least she had her old house to return to, where her mother lived. Kristin arrived at her hometown and went to her neighbour Mrs. Brady, who kept the key to her mother's house. Kristin hoped that elderly Mrs. Brady was still alive, and she was indeed alive and well. She recognised Kristin and exclaimed, "Oh, Kristin, you're back, and your poor mum didn't wait. Here are your keys. I've kept them safe. I also kept an eye on the house to make sure no one did anything. My son-in-law is now the local police chief, so everyone respects me. Here are the keys, or maybe you'd like to have something to eat and drink some tea?" "No, Mrs. Brady, thank you. I want to be alone." Kristin expressed her gratitude to her neighbour. She knew about her curiosity and talkativeness and didn't want to spend the whole day in conversation. Mrs. Brady seemed to understand her. She said, "All right, dear, rest for now. I'll bring you some hot tea and a snack." Kristin struggled to open the door and finally entered. The room was empty, filled with a musty smell and dust. Memories overwhelmed her. She thought that she could hear her mother's voice and caught a whiff of her scent, feeling her warmth and love. She moved around the house, which was familiar from her childhood, touching almost forgotten items and engaging in silent conversations with them. Suddenly there was a quiet knock at the door, and the neighbour entered. She placed a thermos of tea and a box of pies on the table, whispering delicately, "Stay alone, dear. Talk to your mother. Here's some tea for you. You can drink it later." With that, the neighbour slipped out of the door. Kristin was left to converse, reminisce and cry. The tears brought relief, washing away the torment of recent years. After calming down, she enjoyed a cup of hot, strong tea and ate pies filled with meat and cabbage, reminiscent of her childhood. Mrs. Brady was an excellent cook and often treated her to delicious food. Kristin began pondering her next steps and the work that lay ahead. There was much to be done, tidying up the house, cleaning, mopping and dusting the floors. However, she decided to leave it for tomorrow. As evening fell and darkness enveloped the surroundings, she prepared herself for bed. Opening the closet, she noticed the linens neatly arranged on the shelves, untouched since her mother's departure. Yes, she could start a new life, try to build her destiny in a new way. But what would it be like? Kristin postponed making concrete plans for later. At the moment, she didn't even know where to begin. Perhaps she needed to find a job to sustain herself. After all, she needed to find a source of income. The next morning, Kristin returned the dishes to Mrs. Brady, expressing gratitude and engaging in conversation about their shared past. She had no intention of revealing how she had been deceived and framed. She simply shared what everyone already knew, that she had caused a car accident and served her sentence. It was all in the past. She also discussed her plans, hoping to gather ideas from Mrs. Brady on how to settle down. Unfortunately, her neighbour had no insights to offer. Kristin inquired about news from the neighbourhood, reminiscing about old acquaintances, and then returned home to continue organising her belongings. The entire day was dedicated to cleaning the house. In the evening, she sat by the window, contemplating her next move. Cleaning was exhausting, but it was the easiest part of her journey. What lay ahead was uncertain. During her first year or two in the colony, she often fantasized about gaining her freedom and seeking justice against those who had cruelly ruined her life. Then, somehow, it was forgotten. And now she did not even remember about Cynthia, her father, or their despicable deception. What is there to remember now? It is impossible to undo the past. Hoping that these individuals would feel remorse was futile. They would probably blame her for everything, or even accuse her of threats and insults. Kristin didn't need that negativity in her life right now. She had to focus on herself. The city wasn't far from her settlement, but it was gradually expanding, threatening to engulf it. However, the bus service was infrequent, so getting there was like a challenge. With little hope of finding employment, Kristin ventured into the city for the first time. She simply wanted to revisit familiar places, not expecting to encounter anyone she knew. She was hardly recognizable now, not due to a drastic physical change or aging. It was something in her eyes, a reflection of the hardships she had endured. Her attire also differed from before. Kristin had never been wealthy, but she always dressed simply yet tastefully. However, now her entire wardrobe consisted of a shabby tracksuit, the same one she had worn when she returned from prison. As she walked, she couldn't help but laugh at herself and her secret dream of finding an advertisement for a modelling agency looking for girls. However, glimpsing her reflection in shop windows, Kristin thought, yes, I could be a model, no doubt. She realised that she actually looked excellent. Her hair had grown back after a short haircut, and despite not having the opportunity to take care of her face while in prison, it hadn't affected her appearance. So, if she saw an ad for a casting call, she wouldn't hesitate to apply. She was ready to take a chance. Back at home in the safety and peace of her own space, Kristin entertained the idea of a different life. She wondered, why not live in the countryside, have chickens, plant a vegetable garden? At least I won't go hungry, and there won't be any unpleasant surprises. But she dismissed the thought as a betrayal to her mother. She had to pursue her dream and make her mother proud, even if she couldn't be there physically. Several days in a row, Kristin went to the city, hoping to find some work. Unfortunately, she didn't find a job, but she stumbled upon what she had dreamed of, a casting call for a modelling agency. Kristin was overjoyed. There was a competition in 3 days. The young woman hurried home, making a quick stop at the store to buy some cosmetics for the big day. After all, she couldn't show up at the casting looking pale and dull, could she? She walked past the shop windows displaying beautiful outfits on mannequins, trying not to think about the fact that she had nothing to wear. She pushed those thoughts aside for later and focused on preparing for the competition. She had to give it her all. Okay, I only have 3 more days. Neither the dress nor money will fall from the sky, but I can't give up my life's dream for such a small thing. No, no way. The answer came at home. Kristin opened the closet and saw her mother's outfits. No, Helen had never been a dandy. She simply had no opportunities for that. But she had an excellent taste, and all the few outfits were beautiful and stylish. The business dark green suit will not work. Maybe this blue woolen dress? Mum was gorgeous putting it on. Or what about the grey one with roses? Wow! This mint-coloured silk will be just right. Yes, it was made 20 years ago, but fashion repeats itself. Not exactly, of course, but it's a beautiful dress in perfect condition. Mum only wore it a few times on great holidays. The dress fit Kristin perfectly. It didn't even need fitting. Just air it out, iron it, and you're ready for the catwalk. Shoes. Here you go. White sandals, dainty and also brand new. Poor Mum didn't even wear them, but she left them to her daughter as a blessing. Thanks, Mum, Kristin whispered, swallowing her tears. 3 days later, she left the house, fully prepared. Kristin even ordered a cab because she didn't want to get dirty on the way. She styled her wonderful hair a little old-fashioned, just like her mother used to do. When she was looking in the big mirror before leaving, she almost cried again, seeing not herself, but her mother. But the young woman quickly forbade herself to cry, so as not to ruin her makeup before such an important event. With this mindset, she entered the hall where the young beauties had gathered. Kristin was probably the oldest, or was it the old-fashioned look that added to her age? She heard one of the girls venomously asking, without even lowering her voice, "Where have I come to? A party for people over 30? And the other girls giggled. That wasn't the only remark she had heard. They were intentionally passing by, using wicked wit. She had to listen to remarks about her grandmother's trunk and how it smelled of mothballs, as well as discussions about the fashion trends during the end of the Cold War. The mood was sinking, but Kristin wasn't going to give up. Besides, she noticed that she was prettier than many modern fashionable girls. She had a better figure and a better face, and her outfit looked more stylish than most. However, despite all this, Kristin might not have been allowed to participate in the contest if it hadn't been for a miracle. She was noticed by the person who founded and sponsored the contest, a wealthy man whose word held great influence. It wasn't just the girl's undeniable beauty that struck this man, but her resemblance to his first love. At first glance, he didn't notice Kristin, but the dress that he himself had given to his beloved many years ago. And then he looked up at the face of the person wearing it. His heart skipped a beat. His eyes became blurry. It was his Helen. Mr. Garson fell in love 25 years ago, and as it turned out, that love lasted a lifetime. At first, it may not have seemed that way, just a crush. That's why he let her go. He broke up with her. She was hurt. He couldn't remember what happened exactly. Something trivial, a grudge, ambition. A year later, or maybe even more, his heart started to ache. Where is she, his beloved? He searched for her but couldn't find her. She lived in the city in a dormitory. He went there and they told him, "She's gone somewhere, either back home or she got married." Oh, youth, was it so difficult to find her? But there was no time. Work, studies, business. He met another woman and thought he was in love again. He then got married, but still wasn't happy, and every now and then he remembered her. Helen. Then, many years later, he heard from someone that his beloved had passed away, and now he met this girl. Of course, she is not his Helen, but who? Her daughter? And why did she come to the casting wearing her mother's dress? Mr. Garson had a purpose for being there. He was also involved in the selection process, so he approached the members of the jury and asked directly, "What do you think of that girl over there in pale green?" The chairman of the admissions committee spotted her, checked some papers. "Her name is Kristin Hobbs. She's good, of course, perfect figure, but she's 24 years old, and the outfit she's chosen, well, it's ridiculous. And her movements are awkward. And most importantly, her biography is unclear. Nonsense, we should accept her. She's the daughter of a very important person," said Mr. Garson as he walked away. The chairman shrugged and ticked off Kristin's name, but when the sponsor stepped back, the jury members grumbled. Here we go, daughters and granddaughters. What can we do? The one who pays gets to decide what he wants. He would even accept a hunchback girl, but the number of places is limited. Because of these relatives, someone will have to be rejected. Calm down, gentlemen. Yes, we'll have to reject someone, but not for long. We'll figure it out. For now, we can't refuse. But later? Meanwhile, after uttering the word daughter and hearing Kristin's age, Mr. Garson suddenly thought about it. He saw her date of birth. He stepped aside, strained his memory, made some calculations, and realized that she could very well be his daughter. But even if everything turned out to be true, what should he do? He had a family, not a very successful one, but still a family, a wife, children, and the girl was already an adult, so adopting her wouldn't be appropriate. But he should at least spend time with her, talk to her. He waited for the contest results to be announced, congratulated the winners, including Kristin, who was overjoyed and hadn't expected such happiness. Mr. Garson embraced her gently, ran his hand through her silky blossoming hair, and a few strands became his possession. He decided to do a DNA test to finally confirm his suspicion. He didn't know why he needed it, because he was certain that he wouldn't leave the girl without his help and support. Of course, his wife needed to be informed about the situation too. It wasn't that he was afraid of her or didn't want to upset her. It was because she feared losing him and, more importantly, the money. That's why she was jealous, for no reason at all. She would create scenes, even in front of their 16 and 14-year-old sons. And when she finds out that he has a daughter whom he wants to support in everything, it's terrifying to imagine what will happen. Kristin started working at the agency, but the euphoria of her victory quickly began to fade away. She couldn't help but notice that she wasn't being treated well. The other girls made fun of her, were rude and hostile. It was impossible to establish a normal relationship with anyone. The managers were polite on the surface, but they didn't hide their dislike. One day, Kristin even overheard someone saying about her, "She is because of our special position. We have to take her into account." Kristin didn't like it at all. Why was she in a special position? Who did they think she was? Yes, it seems like I won't be here for long, she thought with annoyance. It's a shame, of course, but on the other hand, what did I expect? All models have short-lived careers. Many people tried to shorten her term of service, and they knew how to do it. Is she really Mr. Garson's protégé? I'm sure she's his mistress. It's obvious. Why else would he come almost every day here and ask about her? He's a married man, and his wife, she will be furious about it. So we should make her a hint. Of course, Mrs. Garson didn't like her husband's closeness to the modelling agency either. Who would like their spouse constantly surrounded by young beauties? So she often visited the agency under the pretense of looking at the models' clothes. And at the same time, she always talked to some of the management. It was beneficial for everyone. Megan could keep an eye on things, and the agency's management could get rid of undesirable girls, like Kristin, for example. During the boss's wife's next visit, among other praises for her husband, she heard the following. "Mr. Garson is so attentive. He treats his friends so well, sometimes even at his own expense. We hired that girl at his request. Normally we fire experienced models at 25, but we had to take her. She's someone's daughter, as I heard, and he always comes by, asking how she's doing." Megan carefully observed Kristin. No, she wasn't going to confront her directly. No way. She had her methods, and she had her connections too. She was determined to find out everything about Kristin. And the next day, she got that valuable information, and she brought it to everyone's attention. "Are you out of your mind? She's nobody's daughter. She's an orphan with a very difficult past. She lives alone in a village, unemployed because who would hire someone with a criminal record? A D to your HR department. Those gaps could have been filled in 5 minutes. She was in jail. She just got out. She served 4 years. Someone was seriously injured, possibly crippled or even dead. She didn't even have a license. Someone gave her the car. Or maybe she stole it. That seemed to be enough for everyone to know within 5 minutes what Kristin was really like. The disgraced girl had to leave the place she had once dreamed of, with tears in her eyes. Mr. Garson wasn't present at the scene. He arrived later, after his wife had left, and he immediately was informed about the reason for Kristin's dismissal. Believe me, no one forced her to leave, although you can understand it's not easy working with someone who has such a past. She realized it herself. She said goodbye, packed her things and left. An address? Yes, of course, but we didn't verify it. Mr. Garson went there with full confidence that he would finally reveal the truth to the girl. Kristin was his daughter. Just the day before, he received the results of the DNA test confirming their kinship. However, the address was wrong. Kristin had never lived in the house that she had given him. Mr. Garson returned home, wondering how he would find her. He had once accepted her mother's disappearance, but now he wasn't about to lose his daughter as well. "How could you?" he snapped at his wife at home. "Who let you mind your own business?" "What could I do?" asked his wife with a voice trembling with rage. "I just told the truth. It was you who lied like a fool. You called her your friend's daughter, but I'm certain that she's your mistress." "You know, I'm tired of listening to such disgusting accusations. And yes, she's my daughter," Mr. Garson bellowed. "Here's a test to prove it." "What are you staring at? You knew you weren't marrying a boy." "That was before your time. I didn't even know about her. Now I do. And you, Megan, can't change anything." Stunned, Mrs. Garson ran to the bedroom, fell on the bed, and sobbed loudly. Her sons sat down next to her, consoled her, looking judgmentally at their father. He decided to postpone talking to them for a while. They, too, were about to learn that they had a sister, but he needed to find her first. Kristin had deliberately given the wrong address. She didn't want anyone to know she lived in the village. When she ran away from the agency, she returned to her home. She mourned the collapse of her dream and decided that she had had enough of the air castles. What kind of model was she? "Tomorrow I'll go to the city and apply for any job. Janitor, cleaner, loader, waitress or whatever. The harder, dirtier is the better. There will be less time for stupid hopes," she decided. Towards evening, an acquaintance came by, a former fellow villager who had long ago moved to the city but often visited her family. Mrs. Brady, a kind-hearted neighbour, had hinted to her about Kristin's troubles, so the woman decided to help. "I hear you're looking for a job. I'm looking for a salesman. I have a stall near the station. We sell baked goods. Do you want to try?" "I would, but I have a criminal record," Kristin admitted. "So what? For theft or for fraud? Then who hasn't made mistakes in life?" So Kristin started selling pies and buns near the bus station. The salary was not much, but the work was quiet and did not bring any special problems. And the fact that she was at the workplace alone, without any colleagues, ready at any moment to set her up, Kristin liked most of all. She was totally disappointed in people. The young woman tried to forget about her short work in the modelling agency, about her ambitions, broken hopes. After work in the evening, she liked to sometimes walk around the city. It was a bit boring in the village. That is why Kristin was in no hurry to return to an empty house. Once, walking along the main avenue, she glimpsed a brightly lighted hall and froze in shock. As if on purpose for her, there at one of the tables sat the people who had played the most tragic role in her life, her former classmate Cynthia and her father. She was forced to sell pies and live alone in the village because of them, and they, by all appearances, were thriving. They both looked neither happy nor sad, but rather businesslike. Only Cynthia sometimes lowered her eyes modestly. No one would mistake her for Kristin now, and it wasn't even that the woman was dressed in the latest fashion. Cynthia looked like a self-confident mistress of life. She had gotten a little fat since Kristin had last seen her, but the most annoying thing was that the same rich man, the sponsor of the modelling agency, who Kristin guessed was indirectly responsible for her dismissal, was sitting at the same table with them. Wasn't he the one who had paid too much attention to her, because of which she was considered almost like his mistress? Such hints had been heard not infrequently. She had not even had the opportunity to object. But now these people, by all appearances, have known each other for a long time, maybe even friends. Of course, Kristin didn't even think of approaching. Why should she? And standing under the window, gazing at someone else's happiness, was humiliating. Kristin hurried away, trying not to think about the people who played a terrible role in her life. She went home, because tomorrow morning she had to go to work again. I should stop snacking on pies and take some apples with me for lunch, or I'll become like that Cynthia. Her father didn't take the car away from her, I guess. Meanwhile, she could walk once in a while to be in better shape, Kristin thought, with a slight gloating. The next day, a man in a wheelchair, young but not well groomed, came to Kristin's stall. Before hiring Kristin, the stall owner had set a main condition. Don't pity beggars. You're young, trusting, compassionate, but remember, if you give them even a burnt or stale one, then you won't be able to get rid of them. They'll be all over you. Give for the children, give for the old people, and that keeps the normal customers away. Not only will I have to fire you, but I'll have to move the store. And Kristin strictly followed this rule, not giving in to any requests from various vagrants and drunks. However, she felt sorry for this man right away, so when he timidly asked for a pie as a loan, she couldn't refuse. He didn't look homeless. He wasn't insolent, and he didn't beg for pity. She could see how embarrassed he was, not even raising his face. But when he finally did, Kristin shuddered. His eyes were so blue and innocent, shining with gratitude. She was bewildered, not just because of that, but because the past had come back once again. This was the same man who had suffered because of Cynthia. The same man for whom Kristin had spent 4 endless years in the colony. He wasn't present at the trial, as he was in hospital at the time. However, the investigator showed her a picture of this man, so she could see the good young man she had ruined. Did you want to go for a ride? And now he'll be lying there for the rest of his life. He is only 3 years older than you. Now Kristin's heart ached at the sight of him. Of course she couldn't refuse him. You don't think I'm a beggar? I'll get my pension soon and I'll pay it all, he assured her. What are you talking about? Kristin was very embarrassed, afraid he would recognize her if 4 years ago he had seen her picture. But she still continued. Would you like some tea? I have some here. That would be great, the guy agreed, taking the cup from her. What's your name? She asked. David. And I'm Kristin. They exchanged a few more phrases and Kristin invited him to come again. The rest of the time she couldn't stop thinking about him. Meanwhile, Mr. Garson continued to search for his daughter. He didn't have much time, so he hired a private detective to find out everything about the girl. And the next day, he already had Kristin's exact address, as well as the main stages of her biography. As soon as he could, he went to her house. He already knew where and at what time she worked. Kristin was amazed and not unpleasantly surprised to see Mr. Garson at the threshold of her house. But now she had no need to be polite with him. Why have you come? She asked without inviting the man into the house and without a hint of friendliness. Because I loved and still love your mother, and you were born out of our love. You are my daughter. Kristin stared at him in amazement. And I have proof. May I come in? I'll tell you what happened, and then you can send me away if you like. I promise I won't argue. Without hesitation, Kristin let enter the man who claimed to be her father. How could she really refuse him? he might be her only family. They talked late into the evening. Mr. Garson shared the story of his relationship with Kristin's mother, their separation, and how he hadn't been persistent enough in his search. He met other women, and he didn't give those relationships more importance because he still remembered his beloved Helen. "I had no idea that you were born. Helen never told me. She didn't trust me, apparently, so now you have every right to kick me out. But please, tell me how your life turned out. I know about your trial." "I'm not going to kick you out. You're the only family I have now. I was imprisoned, but it wasn't my fault. Those scoundrels you were peacefully talking to in the restaurant a few days ago were to blame." And Kristin explained the role of Cynthia and her father in the case. Oh my God. So Helen could have been saved, and that scoundrel? No. But I knew he was a scumbag. But this? Now he'll pay for everything. They asked me to lend them money. A loan. That fool hired his daughter to work for his company. She signed all sorts of documents without even a look. They were on the verge of bankruptcy because of that. Luckily, I found out in time about their participation in my dear people's lives. Now they won't get a penny. Not from me or anyone else. I have someone else to spend it on. What can I do for you, Kristin? Kristin sighed and made up her mind. I don't need anything, but I'd like to help that guy who has become an invalid through their fault. There must be something else we can do. I'll start tomorrow. I'll send him to the best clinic and get all the doctors involved. We couldn't save Helen, but at least we can save him. And what about you, my daughter? Have you considered trying luck in a modelling agency one more time? I'll find you the best agency where you'll fit right in. I'm not sure. I can't work as a model until my pension, even with your help. But let's discuss that later. Right now I really want to help David. We recently met, and although he doesn't blame me, I still feel sorry in front of him. Mr. Garson did not deceive. Soon, David began his examination and treatment. Kristin couldn't say she was in love with the young man, but she saw his blue eyes in her mind all the time. However, their true feelings blossomed when Kristin started visiting him at the clinic, helping him through his long rehabilitation. She shared with him the role that the fatal accident had played in her life and told him that the perpetrators had received their due punishment. They got what they deserved. They paid for their actions. They've lost everything. Cars, houses, everything. They only have one apartment now. They're broke and have no reputation in the business community. Everyone knows about their wrongdoings. They can't even move to another city. No money. And they won't start with a clean slate. Besides, Mr. Cattrall is not young anymore, and his daughter is as dumb as a doorknob. I'm not gloating. I'm just happy that justice has been served. David and Kristin were doing best. The guy recovered quickly, and Kristin gained fame after joining another modelling agency. When David had mostly recovered from surgery and rehabilitation, they had a beautiful wedding, which was a gift from Kristin's father.